Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Robert Allen, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is aircraftwoman Lucy Owen. Today, we remember the beachhead battles of Boonah, Gonah, and Sanananda, and commemorate the 80th anniversary of the fall of Sanananda. The beachhead battles were the final slog in the long campaign to defeat the Japanese in Papua. Beginning an overland attack towards Port Moresby in July 1942, Japanese forces established beachheads on the north coast at Boonah, Gonah, and Sanananda. By mid-September, the Japanese had fought their way along the Kokoda Trail and, it is said, could see the lights of Port Moresby. But they had outrun their supply line and were ordered to withdraw because of losses suffered elsewhere. Digging in along the north coast, the remaining Japanese troops were determined to hold the beachheads at all costs. The difficult conditions favoured the Japanese and their strong network of well-concealed defences. For 2 bloody months, the Australians and Americans threw themselves against the defenders. Allied air power deterred the Japanese from reinforcing and resupplying the beachheads, and towards the end of the battle, some defenders were withdrawn by sea or escaped overland. But the remaining garrison would fight to the death, almost to the last man. Halfway between Boonah and Gonah, Sanananda formed the centre of the main Japanese defensive position. The Japanese commander concentrated most of his force in this area and took personal command. Unlike Boonah and Gonah, where the defences were mainly on the coast, Sanananda, the defences were placed along the track, with positions protected by deep camouflage bunkers made of logs that were placed in depth. After crossing the Owen Stanley Ranges and fighting a series of intense battles, the Australian troops were sick and under strength. Reinforcements conducted a series of determined attacks, but could not force the Japanese from their bunkers. Unknown to the Australians, the Japanese, who were sick and starving, had been ordered to withdraw. Aware that the fall of Boonah and Gonah heralded the eventual fall of Sanananda, they had been ordered to make a breakout and escape north along the coast. Some succeeded, and by the 21st of January, all organised Japanese resistance in Papua had ceased. The Australian units in this sector sustained over 1,400 battle casualties, the Americans 700. Victory at Sanananda marked the end of a gruelling 6-month Papuan campaign, during which the Japanese employed about 20,000 troops, of whom more than 13,000 died. Today, we remember the beachhead battles and the fall of Sanananda. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths of floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Trooper Ernest Edward Crofts. Ernest Crofts and his twin brother Richard were born on the 20th of August 1912 in Bathurst, New South Wales. The sons of Arthur and Marie Crofts, they were known as Jack and Dick. Jack went on to work as a clerk at the Commonwealth Bank on Collins Street in Melbourne. In April 1939, he joined the militia, parading part-time with the 3rd Division Signals at Albert Park, while Dick joined the 6th Light Horse Regiment. Jack and Dick enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 17th of July, 1941, at the recruiting depot in Martin Place, Sydney. After joining a training unit based in Canberra, in September, they were transferred to the recently raised 2nd 6th Armoured Regiment, joining it in camp at Greta, New South Wales. Following Japan's entry into the war, in December, the 2nd 6th moved to Tamworth, where it was equipped with machine gun carriers and held responsibility for the mobile defence of the Coffs Harbour area. In January 1942, the regiment moved to Singleton for further training, and the men received their first tanks, M3 Stuart light tanks, in May. In mid-August, the 1st Armoured Brigade moved to Narrabee, where the 2nd and 6th were chosen to be the 1st Armoured Regiment to go to Papua. A Squadron went first, arriving in Port Moresby in late September, with the rest of the regiment following shortly afterwards. At Port Moresby, Jack, Dick, and their comrades conducted jungle training and worked as stretcher barriers, unloading aircraft and carrying wounded evacuated from Kokoda. By December, the Japanese had been pushed back along the Kokoda Trail, and the plans were underway to attack their defensive positions on Papua's north coast at Buna, Gona, and Sanandia. Sailing at night by barge, the tanks were taken from Port Moresby to Oro Bay. C Squadron went into action first, supporting the successful American attack on the 18th of December. C Squadron was then relieved by B Squadron, which took part in the bitter fighting. B Squadron provided invaluable assistance to the accompanying infantry, attacking Japanese pillboxes and other defences. On an attack on the old Buna Strip on the 24th of December, all 4 tanks were involved and were put out of action in under 2 hours, and some of the crew were killed. There was no reprieve for the living, however, who acted as stretcher barriers for the rest of the day. The squadron continued fighting, but Buna was captured at the start of 1943. After Buna, B Squadron participated in the fighting around Sanandia. The 18th Brigade began its advance on the 12th of January, making little progress and losing more than 100 men killed or wounded. Despite the attackers' lack of success, the Japanese began to withdraw from their forward positions that night. Allied patrols reported that other Japanese positions had also been abandoned. Fighting continued, however, and a further 6 days passed before the Sanandia village was in Allied hands. The surviving Japanese troops were now surrounded, and after 3 more days of fighting, the last organised resistance was overcome. Victory, however, came at a cost of some 2,100 Allied casualties and the lives of more than 1,500 Japanese soldiers. Among the dead was Jack Crofts, who was killed in action on the 12th of January 1943, when his tank was blown up by a landmine on the Sanandia track. Those not killed in the blast were shot as they attempted to leave the tank. Jack Crofts was 30 years old. Today, his remains lie in Port Moresby War Cemetery under the inscription chosen by his grieving family. Greater love hath no man, he gave his life for his friends. His brother Dick survived the war and was discharged in November 1945, returning to Australia with the rank of corporal. Jack Crofts' name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my left among 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Trooper Ernest Edward Crofts, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. The going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.